Today, we're diving into a landmark law in India that's changing millions of lives. And it all boils down to one simple but totally radical question. Who really owns the forest? This is the story of the Forest Rights Act.
Okay, just try to imagine this for a second. You've lived somewhere your whole life. It's the same place your ancestors called home for like centuries. And then one day, you're told that legally, you're a trespasser. Sounds crazy, right? Well, for millions of people in India's forests, this was their reality. So you have to ask, how did this massive injustice even happen? Well, at its very heart, the Forest Rights Act, or the FRA as it's known, is all about one thing: correcting a huge historical injustice. This is a wrong that goes way, way back to the colonial era, a time when the whole concept of who owns a forest got turned completely on its head.
So to really get why this law is so revolutionary, we've got to take a step back in time. We need to see exactly how these communities went from being the guardians of the land to, well, trespassers in their very own homes. It really all started back in the colonial period. Suddenly, these vast forests were declared state property. And just like that, the communities who had looked after them for generations were fenced out. And the craziest part? Even after independence, the system just kept going. The original stewards of the land were now, on paper, encroachers. They were often kicked out for development projects or even, ironically, for conservation, pushing them further and further to the margins of society.
Okay, so this is the history that the Forest Rights Act of 2006 was designed to completely dismantle. We're talking about a total paradigm shift here, a whole new way of thinking about how India's forests are governed.
The main goal of the act is actually pretty simple, but it's also incredibly profound. It's about finally recognizing and officially recording the rights these communities already had, and in doing so, legally changing their status from illegal encroachers to the rightful guardians of the forest.
You see, all the Act's objectives are really connected. It all starts with recognizing and recording their rights, which helps secure their livelihoods. Then, it empowers the local village councils, the Gram Sabhas, to take the lead on conservation, using all their traditional knowledge. And maybe most importantly, it puts a stop to the constant threat of being unlawfully evicted. Okay, so that's the big picture. But how does this all work on the ground? You're probably wondering, who actually gets these rights? And what's the process for claiming them? Let's break it down. All right, the law basically breaks it down into two main groups who can claim these rights. And the cutoff date for both is December 13th, 2005. First, you have members of what are called scheduled tribes. And second, there are other traditional forest dwellers. Now, for this group, they have to prove that they've lived and depended on the forest for at least 3 generations. We're talking 75 years. And this is what's so incredible about this act, the sheer range of rights it grants. I mean, it's not just about a plot of land. You've got individual rights to live on and farm the land. Then there are community rights to use things like forest produce or grazing lands. But maybe the real game changer is what's called community forest resource rights. This gives entire villages the power to manage their traditional forests. The act even covers habitat rights for the most vulnerable groups and makes sure land can be set aside for essentials, like schools and clinics. Now, looking at this flowchart, the whole process might seem a little complicated. But the most important thing to remember is where it all starts. It begins right at the grassroots level, with the local village assembly. And right here, this is the absolute heart of the Act's power. It all kicks off with the Gram Sabha. That's the village assembly, made up of all the adult members. And this isn't just some advisory role, okay? The law gives this body the actual authority to start the process, verify the facts, and approve the claims. It's a genuinely bottom-up system. So let's walk through how that actually plays out. Step 1, a claim gets filed with the Gram Sabha. Then its own Forest Rights Committee goes out and verifies everything on the ground. After that, the entire Gram Sabha gets together and passes a resolution, either to approve it or not. And only then does it start moving up the ladder to be reviewed by committees at the subdivisional and district levels. They're the ones who give the final stamp of approval and issue the legal land titles. Now, this brings up a really important question, one you might be thinking of right now. What about all the protected areas? I mean, does this law still apply inside national parks or wildlife sanctuaries or even in those supercritical tiger reserves? And the answer is a big, unambiguous yes. The law is crystal clear on this point. The Forest Rights Act applies to all forests. It doesn't matter what their classification is. This ensures that the rights of these communities are recognized absolutely everywhere. Okay, so a law on paper is one thing, but what's it actually like in the real world? Let's talk about the challenges, because trying to implement a law this transformative is, well, it's not easy.
And yeah, the road from rights on paper to rights in reality has definitely been bumpy. For starters, a lot of communities don't even know this law exists. And for those who do, they often run into a wall of bureaucracy, endless delays, inaccurate mapping, you name it. And even when someone does get their land title, that's not the end of the story. There's often very little support to help them actually build a sustainable life on that land.
So the big question is, how do we fix this? How do we bridge that gap between the promise of the law and the reality on the ground? What's the path forward to go from just recognizing rights to actually realizing the full potential of this act for everyone involved, people and forests alike?
Well, a big part of the answer is actually baked right into the law itself. See, the act isn't just about rights, it's also about responsibilities. It legally empowers these communities to be the ones conserving and protecting their own environment. Look, the path forward really needs action on a bunch of different fronts. First off, at the local level, it means training and strengthening those Gram Sabhas and maybe using digital tools to speed up the whole claims process. Then, from an economic standpoint, it means giving people real, tangible support for their livelihoods once they get their titles. And finally, at the government level, it's about breaking down those bureaucratic silos and making sure the goals of this act are part of all forest management plans. When you really get down to it, the Forest Rights Act is so much more than just a law. It's a fundamental shift in how we think about conservation. It's about moving away from an old exclusionary model and moving toward one that's inclusive and led by the community. It's not just restoring land, it's restoring dignity and power to the very people who know these forests best. And that quote, "Let us walk together with forests, for people," just captures the spirit of this whole thing perfectly. It's a call for partnership, it's a recognition that the health of our forests and the well-being of people are not separate issues. They're deeply, deeply connected. So the question this leaves us with is a big one. What could our world look like if this kind of model, this blend of justice and guardianship, became the future of conservation everywhere?